for this very special meeting of the Sonoma City Council, Monday, June 22nd, 2020. We've had a closed session, so do we need to report out on the closed session?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Harvey. The council held a closed session on labor negotiations and staff was given direction. Thank you.
Great. Wonderful. Great. So we'll go ahead and bring up the flag and do the Pledge of Allegiance. And let's go. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Wonderful. All right. Great. So just to review, this is again a virtual meeting of the Sonoma City Council, and we're able to hold virtual meetings as a result of Governor Newsom's, always want to say Brown, Governor Newsom's executive order allowing for virtual meetings of local governments and amending the Brown Act in that fashion. And so we're hosting this meeting virtually. A couple notes on that. There is a possibility that we could be Zoom bombed or hacked, and the meeting could be taken over. If that does happen, then we will shut the meeting down. The meeting will stop at the moment it was shut down, and no further action will take place. We will try to bring the meeting back to order and continue from where we left off. We're unable to do that. Again, excuse me, no further action will take place, and we will continue the meeting at a later date. Public comment will happen in one of two ways. You may send us an email at publiccomment@sonomacity.org, or you may comment publicly by attending the meeting virtually. If you send us an email, the emails will be accepted from the beginning of this meeting and actually previously until the end of the close of the public comment period. So we're going to start with the open public comment, and you could, at the end of that, we would no longer accept a written public comment if we get, and then each item for discussion will also have its own public comment period. If you would like to comment virtually, if you're calling in, you can dial *9 and that will raise your hand on the Zoom session. If you are Zooming in, then just go ahead and raise your hand. Don't do it physically again, but tap that raise your hand button and we will recognize it, bring you into the chat. As normal, you'll have 3 minutes to comment. That's pretty much what we're working with these days. And if we're reading it, Latanya will have 3 minutes to read your comment, at which point we'll cut it off. So if you hear us saying 30 minutes left, 30 seconds left, apologize, or a minute left, do not be offended. We're just trying to let you know of your time so you can wrap up your thoughts. Great. So we've got let's go ahead and there's no public comment at this special meeting because it is a special meeting. It's so special, there's no public comment. We do that at our regular meetings, at least for general public comment. We've got no consent calendar because it's also a special meeting. So we'll go ahead and bring it into items for discussion. Item 3.1, consideration, discussion, and possible action to reappoint a representative. Oh, excuse me, I'm yawning today. Representative to the Sonoma County Library Commissioner. And this is up to council discretion. I guess I'll turn it over to you, Kathy Capriola, our city manager.
Great. Thank you, Mayor Harvey, members of the council and community. So the item in front of you is to potentially appoint a representative to the Library Commission. And just a little background on the Library Commission. This is a separate joint powers authority that runs the libraries across Sonoma County. And it's made up of the cities of Cloverdale, Cotati, Healdsburg, Petaluma, Rohnert Park, Santa Rosa, Sebastopol, Sonoma, Windsor, along with the county. And each agency appoints a library commissioner. Now, what's a little unique here is that the library commissioner traditionally has been a member of the public. A lot of these joint powers authorities that city council members sit on, whether it's RCPA or SCTA, Zero Waste, those joint powers authorities where we collaborate with other jurisdictions in the county, those have a member of an elected body that sits as the board of directors making budget decision, hiring decisions, etc. Here, the tradition has evolved. And there's some history to that, I think, but where the Library Commission is a member of the public and the council member sits on what's called the Library Advisory Board. So currently, Councilmember Agramonte sits as the Library Advisory Board, and they review more local issues. And then the commissioner is currently Thomas Hauser, who has served for the past 4 years. Mr. Hauser has expressed an interest to continue his service forward. He's actually being recommended to serve as the vice chair of the Library Commission. And so this action is in front of you to see whether council has interest in appointing Mr. Hauser to another 4-year term. The library JPA kind of timing is a little different. It doesn't line up with our, and can't line up with our February 1 appointments that we do for other things. The other option for council is to appoint one of yourselves as an elected official and have a member of the council serve as the commissioner. Or you might decide that you want to continue Mr. Hauser's service for a while, but you want to open it up to others and have us go out and do a recruitment as we would typically do in a non-kind of emergency time frame. So if council does want to continue to have Mr. Hauser serve, you can make that motion, waive your current policy of kind of doing a recruitment process and appoint Mr. Hauser going forward. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions and turn it to council for your direction.
Do we have questions?
No. I have comments.
She was ready to go with the comments, but not with the questions.
I know.
I have a question. When was this joint powers agreement executed, and when was the last time that it has been reviewed by its members?
I don't have all that right on my fingerprints. I apologize. I know it was done. It was reviewed probably within the last 10 years. There was a broader review that was done. And my understanding that there at times there have been some elected officials that have served on the Library Commission. It is a time-intensive board to sit on. So I've heard also that that's been an issue in the past for some other cities. Again, there's already a lot of regional bodies that council members sit on. I think it really is a question of where, one question is, is just a philosophical issue. Do you want an elected on a JPA making those decisions? Or alternatively, are you comfortable having a member of the public play that role based on the, kind of the overall decisions that are being made?
And through the mayor, it was done since I've been on the council. I think it was 2014 or 15. It just got done. I guess that was probably 5 or 6 years ago. Time goes by fast.
Yeah, you're right. I contacted Bob Cox, who is no longer on the council there in Cloverdale, and he explained the makeup, the votes and everything. And it's kind of interesting. I agree that I think electeds should be on this board because they actually deal with the budgets. But at this point, with everything's going on.
Question period.
Oh, I'm supposed to be asking a question?
We got to do public comment.
Okie dokie. Thank you so much.
We'll be right there for that.
Is that a question, Luke?
It's perfectly fine. You're good. All right. So if that's the end of council questions, I'll bring it out for public comment. And opening public comment period with the magic clap. We've got one raising their hand. A 707-996-2132 number. Let's bring them on and hear their comments.
Hello, this is Thomas Hauser, the current serving commissioner. And the JPA was modified in 2014. All the cities, they brought in Cotati, which had not been a member up to that time, and a couple of other cities. I'm just here to say that I thank you for taking some time out of this busy time to consider this, so we don't have a lapse in the appointment for the city commissioner. My concern about a city council member being on the library commission is it's an enormous amount of work, and it's very, very difficult for employed people to do one job, nevertheless two. And so that's just my concern. Personally, I'm on the finance committee, the bylaws committee, the ad hoc fundraising committee, I'm also the liaison to the Sonoma County Library Commission, to the Sonoma County Public Library Foundation, which we're trying to beef up to get to be a fundraiser so we can raise some capital funds to pay for some of the things that the cities and the county are having trouble to pay for right now under the JPA. And whatever you do tonight, I'll continue to work for the library. And that's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Tom. Do we have an additional public comment or any written public comment that we've received?
No written public comments, Mayor Harvey.
Wonderful. Seeing no one else rise, I'll go ahead and close the public comment session and move into council member comments. Councilmember Agramonte, did you have any comments you wanted to share?
Well, I certainly do. I wanted to let you know that I did receive an email from Bob Cox, who used to be on this commission, and he says, yes, there are 11 votes. When we first set it up, there was 1 vote for each city, and we have 9 cities, and a vote for the county. That would be 10 votes, creating a possible 5-5 decision. So to remedy this, the committee created a floating member representing 1/2 for the county and 1/2 for Santa Rosa. And it seemed to be workable as Santa Rosa has more than 1 branch as the county does. So I actually think that elected should be on this. I think we're used to being really, really busy. However, I don't believe at this point that's something I'm, on the lab, and I'm not interested in serving on this at this point. But I really do believe that sometime in the future, a council member should serve on it, because I think it's a very important position, and it has a way for us to be able to weigh in how our city feels about the services that are here at our library.
Thank you, Madeline. Do we have additional comments? We see Councilmember Harrington raising her hand.
Yeah, I think I would support Tom Hauser continuing on for some period of time. I was really disappointed in how the library bond measure funds were spent. My daughter actually used to be a library junior commissioner. She was on the lab, so maybe I had some additional information about their agendas, but I know the money that was supposed to be spent on extending the hours for the library was instead spent on groundskeeping, replacing costs that we're already paying. And it was also a huge amount of money was spent on renting a storage place for books instead of what was promised to the voters, which was extended hours. So I think with regard to having an elected official who's accountable to the voters, I think that makes sense. I got an email from former Mayor Joanne Sanders today, bringing up the idea of possibly having the library commissioners just be independently elected, because I would agree there's a tremendous amount on all of our plates and nobody has the extra time, I think, to take on a large endeavor. I don't have it. But maybe rethinking the JPA, and maybe those should be just independently elected. Something like that makes sense. But in the meantime, extending Tom Hauser's term with some awareness that the Measure Y funds were really spent, I don't think many of them were spent on purposes that were not what was promised in the original bond measure.
Thank you, Councilmember Harrington. Vice Mayor Hunley or David?
Yeah, I'll go ahead. I also got an email from former Mayor Joanne Sanders, and I did like what Councilmember Harrington just spoke about. I think it should be elected position, but not a member of the council. But I do believe that Tom Hauser's done a great job, so I'll be supporting Tom Hauser to be the library commissioner continuation. He's done a really good job, and Tom, I'm sure that are listening. Thank you for all your hard work, and I know how hard it is. This library has been a big issue, and maybe a future council could look at possibly having this be an elected official capacity, bringing it to the voters every 4 years. Thank you.
And I will also be supporting Mr. Hauser this evening, and I appreciate your willingness to put your time into this. Certainly very important. And I'm also interested at a future date because I think our list of things that we're working on at the moment is kind of full anyway, but I'm interested in learning more about what the 2014 discussions were and changes, but then also the other cities' thoughts about sort of the oversight and public accountability part of it. And the election part's interesting. I could see this being one of those positions that is unopposed, but of course we wouldn't know until we tried it. But I think there might be something there, and anything with that regard would probably take a couple years anyway. So maybe, next year we could start thinking about it, and then on the coming close to the 10-year anniversary of the last, review and amendment, we could do something else.
Great. I'll also be supporting Tom. I think the idea of having an elected library commissioner is fascinating. Don't have a formulated opinion about that at this moment, but happy to support Tom to reinstate there. I'm looking forward to him being vice chair, and I think he'll be chair the following year, which is always good to have somebody from your city in chair of these large county organizations. A little more oversight and look back to us. And so, yeah, excited to support Tom and looking forward to see what the Library Commission does. I do definitely like having no late fees for books. That helps me out personally.
So I agree. I support Tom.
So if we have a motion.
I move. What is the motion?
A second. I see Kathy wanting to jump in here, though.
Just if Councilmember Agramonte, if you wouldn't mind in your motion also, if your motion is to appoint Tom Hauser to Library Commission, but also to waive the City Council's usual appointment process, because usually we go market and advertise, and based on the emergency, that was not doable this round. So if the motion could include that.
All right. I support Tom Hauser for this position of the commissioner, and to waive the process that is normally used.
Second.
All right, and a roll call vote, please, Rebecca. We cannot hear yet. You're unmuted.
Councilmember Cook,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Hunley, Councilmember Agramonte,
We couldn't hear it.
Aye.
Councilmember Harrington,
Aye.
Mayor Harvey.
Yes.
Okay, the motion carries unanimously.
Well, congratulations, Tom.
Yeah, congratulations.
All right, wonderful. We at least won our election. So moving on, we're moving on to item 3.2 here, presentation on city budget workshop, including 5-year forecast, scenario planning, proposed budget reductions, and proposed fiscal year 2021 budget. I'll provide direction to staff. City Manager Kathy Capriola, take it on.
Great. Thank you, Mayor Harvey, members of the council. So the packet that went out to the council had quite a bit of information in it. Staff's going to provide for members of the public a high-level overview, and then we will be able to pull up any of these slides if council has questions and wants to discuss further. So let me dive in. So council had a first budget workshop on May 8th. That was very early in the pandemic, and the focus there was on the 1920 budget and what we were going to do there, plus then looking at a preliminary general fund 5-year forecast. Today, our focus is to talk about the 2021 budget, and then next week we'll come back with budget adoption. The slides and items, the charts will show you are all in the packets and that you received.
So you're not going by your manager's report?
No, it's going to go a little all over at a high level, Madeline.
Yeah,
Okay.
I know.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. So again, just as a reminder, the financial plan, we put together a 5-year forecast, and this is a tool that we will use ongoing. It's really important to be able to look 5 years out, understand what could happen, and then make adjustments so you do what you want to have happen. Based on the level of uncertainty, we did a lot of focus on some scenarios to really do some what-if planning in this highly unusual economic and public health emergency we're in. And then we put together a variety of budget reduction options and then the proposed budget. So I want to thank Sue Casey, Jenna Burrows, and Lori Decker for their work on all these efforts. You know, we sit here in the world of doing Zoom meetings, and the reality is 3.5 months ago, this was foreign. This was not how we operated. And so I think it's important just briefly to remember in late February, we were still in regular operation mode. And then in early March, everything changed. March 17th, the county shut down the economy, shelter in place, and the city has been focused on response and relief, from operating our EOC to public information, a variety of food security, rental assistance. And then as we've started to come out of the recovery, it's been talking about helping businesses reopen and doing Sonoma safe. At the same time, there's been a lot of work on financial planning and looking at if there's going to be any state or federal funding. And I think the council budget subcommittee, Councilmember Agarmonte and Councilmember Harrington, who provided feedback to us as we work through iterations.
So can I ask, you know, I've numbered these and this isn't in what I've numbered. So what number is this packet? You've numbered it on the agenda, but what number is this?
Sorry, this was just a little bit of an intro piece. Some of this is verbiage that's within the message, within the manager's message, Madeline. This was just to kind of high level for the community. And now I'll start to go through some of the charts that are in.
It's not what I have, so that's okay, keep going.
So first on the 5-year forecast, these slides are in what's called or in the packet of the general fund forecast to some scenario planning. Again, I didn't put all these slides in, so basically part of what we've done is we've tried to forecast based on a range of uncertainty. So we did 3 different scenarios. We had a pessimistic scenario, a base scenario, and an optimistic scenario. And as we're looking at budget, really, there's a triangle of trying to figure out how you reduce expenditures, how you increase revenues, and how much reserves you want to use. So we use some scenarios as we put the forecast together to try to figure out some sensitivity. One of the big pieces that we worked on, and council gave us initial feedback in March, was the transient occupancy tax. And really 25% of the city's budget comes from TOT. And so there was a desire to really be cautious in how much we were projecting on TOT. So we did 3 scenarios. We had an optimistic scenario, which were TOT opening in July, a base August, and pessimistic September. We now know that hotels reopened mid-June, with the big hotels opening July 1. So basically within the budget, the forecast had about 44%. We put a little money more into TOT now that we have more, now that the hotels are opening a little earlier. But it still is a very conservative. We basically budgeted 48% of what we typically would have in our TOT. We also reduced sales tax and worked through that as well based on some refined reductions, and to really try to reduce the sales tax. So we then shifted, and just looking at 2021, there were 3 different scenarios. We had this pessimistic scenario, and then the base. This is where we've headed, which was an overall deficit of 4.6 million. And what we've done is we've done reductions of revenues. The goal was of 2.5 and to use no more than 2.1 in reserves. This was what we were shooting for when we prepared the 2021 budget. And this just shows a little more detail showing the 5 years. And again, looking at this is the 4.6 million. It was about a 22% reduction overall. And the question is, how are we going to make this gap? And that was what we talked about up here, doing some reductions, 2.5 in reductions, and using about 2.1 in reserves. The budget in front of you uses only about 1.9 in reserves. So we've tried to reduce the use of reserves to the greatest extent possible. With that, I'm going to have Sue just briefly, because reserves are an important piece, and just briefly talk to you about reserves.
Okay, so this is now in another packet. Let me keep looking. I don't know. Well, I'll just look at this.
So this is in city manager reserve message.
This is in the manager message.
This is on the second page of that.
Yeah, this is in the manager message, and this is to talk through the overall reserves. Again, and Councilmember Agramonte, part of what we've, in a perfect world, we would have had 2 sessions. We would have had one on the forecast and one on the 2021 budget. And so I appreciate this is condensed and we're trying to do both things in one meeting and provide you with the information.
Well, unfortunately, I have to say it's an aberration. The last 2 years were binders and now they're like jumbles. Please don't use the pandemic, any of those things, because the professionalism has to be there and it's not. So I'll just look on the screen. I don't know where this is. Sorry, Mr. Mayor.
I gotta say, I think that this is the staff, we've asked for them to make large predictions in a very difficult time. We'd asked them to readjust those positions. Staff has communicated with us that we were unlikely to get as clean and as beautiful as a budget as last year.
It makes it even more important that it's precise.
I think the numbers, the precision is going to be difficult in a year where we don't know where the future projections are going to be going. But we've been able to put together, and I think it's clearly on the screen. And
well, it's not in my packet. I looked in the manager's packet. It's not there.
So, Councilmember Agramonte, most of this.
It's not important.
Okay. Well, let us keep going through, and when we're happy to walk through the decision-making process with council using the packets that are in front of you. Again, in the world of Zoom, was trying to kind of provide an overview. Sue, do you want to briefly just go through the reserves?
Yeah. Good evening, council members, and I apologize. My husband is doing construction outside, and I'm trying to get his attention. So if you can't hear me, I'll briefly stop. I'm sorry. So I just want to do a quick update on the reserves. Remember the general fund operating reserve, and the purpose of it is to provide sufficient cash flow and to provide breathing room for the city to evaluate alternatives in the event of financial hardships, provide resources in times of economic uncertainties and downturns, and to provide funding due to unexpected expenditures or reductions in revenues. And that's where we are. So for fiscal year 1920, we're projecting we'll need to use 1.2 million of the operating reserves. And we're also recommending that up to 200,000 of the emergency reserve be set aside for use in the pandemic response. This includes the 100,000 that council assigned for community support and resiliency initiatives. So this brings the fiscal year 1920 total use of reserves up to 1.4 million. So at the beginning of 2021, our total reserves will be 7.45 million, and it could be slightly higher if we have further savings or improved revenues in 1920. For fiscal year 2021, the 7.45 will include emergency reserve of 1.5 million, which is established by the reserve policy, and that will be restored from unassigned reserves. The operating reserve of approximately 3.2 million, which is 17% of the proposed budgeted operating expenditures. And this is also established by the reserve policy and be restored from the unassigned reserves. We have assigned reserves in the budget of 556,000, and that's made up of the general plan reserve of 500,000, 50,000 for the police fire fiscal analysis, and 6,000 for computer loan program reserve. And this leaves 2.2 million in unassigned reserves. And again, over the 5-year forecast You can see at the end of 23, 24, where our reserves will be. We haven't updated the reserve or this chart to, for the projected 200,000 more in reserves because of the hotels opening sooner. So this needs to be updated slightly, but this is just a bar chart showing that what could, you know, if our projections on the base scenario come true, this is what we'll be using in reserves.
Thank you, Sue. So basically what we used is we used the forecast to try to put together, we put together a phase 1 budget, and the phase 1 was based on that forecast using reserves for their intended purpose, which is when you have a deep loss, but try to be cautious going forward. And so those reserves, and then being prepared if the economy does not come back, and what the amount if we end up needing more revenues, if revenues don't come in, being ready to have a phase 2 set of budget reductions. So let's just walk through kind of the proposed overview. These charts, just at a high level, what we were trying to do with the scenario was the base forecast basically said, okay, you're going to have about a $4.6 million deficit. And what we were looking at was expenditure decreases or revenue decreases of 2.5 and use reserves of 2.1. The budget basically comes in at about, with a gap of about 1.9 million use of reserves, because what staff has done is bringing you recommendations where we've brought additional revenues, either one time or ongoing, of about 490,000 and expenditure decreases about 2.1. So it's a little better than what the forecast had seen. So again, the strategy here, and since everything moved really quickly, is in June was phase 1 right now, do a variety of modifications without having to do deep reductions to services and staffing, and using reserves to do that backfill. And that we hold off any major other reductions to staff or services. And if we need those, we'll prepare them and we'll bring them to you in September. And in September and October, we're monitoring and we're adjusting, and we're going to be able to review TOT on a monthly basis. And if we need to make more reductions, we can do so then. So these are some of the reductions that are in the 2021 budget. One, typically we spend about $500,000, $500,000 in capital projects. And this time we're only spending 5,000. So that's a reduction of 495,000. We also are not contributing as much to our internal service funds, vehicles and building maintenance. The police contract was also reduced compared to the current budget of about 110,000, but it's important to note that there was a $510,000 increase above the 11% increase that was proposed in council in May, eliminated 3 positions, a CSO, administrative assistant, and deputy sheriff, and then reduced to take the budget back to kind of base, and then there's additional 110 on top of that.
So to get this 110, I apologize for interrupting, Kathy. So to get this $110,000 decrease, net decrease, we actually ended up cutting 620,000.
Cut over, yeah, it was about 620 something. Yes, yes, that's what was cut. So it was much. This number, I want to be clear, it's kind of misleading because the budget had to come back to the base because it was going to be so much higher. There are also reductions to the operating budget for the fire department. We've reduced the legal budget also for this year. There is a neighborhood, we typically contract out for neighborhood park maintenance and worked with public works staff to bring that in-house, and that's a $60,000 reduction. And then because we have less revenues, there's less funding based on the council's policy of using 1.5% to use for recreation and community services. And so those are also there. So I'll have Sue, these are the charts going back to the all revenue. These are the charts that are, some of these are hard to show the full charts within PowerPoint. So they are, but these are within the packet, the staple packet that have the 2021 budget. Sue?
Okay, so for 2021, this is the expense by program budget for all funds. And again, the focus is always on the general fund, but you can see all the other funds here, the proposed budgets for all the other funds. That includes capital projects, the enterprise funds, water, cemetery, and all of the smaller funds, COPS grant, gas tax, down the list, and our internal service funds, debt service funds, and then our successor agency funds. So for the general fund budget for 2021, the proposal is we're projecting our total revenue will be 17.3 million, and our expenses will be 19.3 million, with the net use of reserves of 1.9 million. Again, that's a little bit of reduction from what we had originally forecast of the 2.1 that we would need to use because of a little bit higher revenue that we're forecasting for TOT. So for general fund, here's a chart that, or a pie chart that just shows our expenditures. As you can see, the police and fire contracts make up 51% of our budget, and the focus on, you know, especially now, police and fire, especially fire, we did make some reductions, but fire, we're coming right into fire season, and we've already had some fires in the valley, and they're predicting this could be a, you know, another bad year for fires. Salary and benefits make up the other percentage, 27%, and then the other smaller ones, service supplies and equipment, 3.1. Revenues, this shows that our sales tax and transient occupancy tax make up the majority portion of our revenues, with property tax falling behind or just a little bit under that. Property tax, we're not predicting any reduction in revenue right now. And again, we'll be following that closely, but according to our property tax expert, that they're not seeing any reductions in the next 2 years. EMS revenue was, we did have some good news there that it's slightly higher, and that's because they've raised their fees for this year. They started in February, and then next year that will continue. And then, so that's the general fund, kind of in a nutshell. The cemetery budget, it is an enterprise fund, really smaller enterprise fund. You can just see the total revenue is, we're projecting to be 340,000, and then expenditures 335,000. So a little bit of a, you know, we won't have a loss there. So it really does kind of balance every year. And then again, you know, we'll be taking a look at the cemetery. So.
Sorry.
That's all right.
Okay. And then we next ask Colleen Ferguson talk about water and CIP.
Okay. Greetings, council members, mayor, vice mayor. Just quickly about the water enterprise fund first, before getting into the CIP. So the water utility budget proposed for next fiscal year will allow the city to continue to deliver high quality, dependable water for the community needs. And the coronavirus impacts on the water fund are less severe than on the general fund, but they do include potential non-payment of water bills by customers and deferral of the scheduled water rate increase from July 2020 to January 2021. Happy to answer questions about the water enterprise fund, or I'll just move on to the CIP. Okay, and the CIP budget, as mentioned by City Manager Capriola, the general fund is only proposing $5,000 of, or the CIP budget is only proposing $5,000 of general funds to CIP projects next fiscal year. The $5,000 is just so the city can continue to offer to participate in the cost of sidewalk repairs conducted by private property owners as part of the city's annual sidewalk inspection and repair program. The program itself is funded through gas tax, but the city's participation is general fund dollars. With this budget, the general fund would not meet the maintenance of effort for some funds that we receive, and the funding requests shown on the slide are to program federal grant funds, gas tax funds, Road Maintenance and Rehabilitation Act funds, Transportation Measure M funds, and existing water CIP fund balance. The major projects we do expect to go to construction in the first half of fiscal year 2021 include the Depot Park First Street West frontage improvements and water system fire flow improvements. Again, I'd be happy to answer any questions about the CIP budget.
No, Colleen, we'll come back.
Okay.
No, Logan, if you have a question.
Can you repeat what you were saying about, so the money, the requests that we're making are to maintain maintenance of effort, which will mean that there's additional revenue coming to the city or additional monies coming to the city for that work, or are we deleting those?
Well, the maintenance of effort, there is a maintenance of effort required for Transportation Measure M and for Road Maintenance and Rehabilitation Act, or SB1 funds. At this point, the maintenance of effort may just be waived for this fiscal year. I mean, the whole state and every city in Transportation Measure M through SETA is in a budget crisis right now.
Right.
And as a representative on the SETA board, I don't know if the board is talking about that, but this budget is based on an understanding that we can't afford to spend general fund dollars on projects this fiscal year, and requirements may be waived, and if not, we have to make up for it in another fiscal year. They're done on averages, and so we're not totally sunk if we don't put general fund dollars into transportation projects for one fiscal year.
Okay.
That makes sense?
But it would require us to put more into those projects in future years.
In future.
How many years is it based on, is the average based on?
I don't have those numbers handy, Mayor Harvey.
That's okay. Great. I appreciate knowing that as the representative of SCTA. I definitely take that to our executive director and the board. Good point. Cool.
Okay.
Thank you.
So here are, so shifting now to some of the one-time items. These are items that are in the manager report. And again, when we finish kind of the high-level overview, we can go pull up the packet and go through it in order to, if that's helpful to the council. So the forecast always assumes about $150,000 of one-time projects. And so what this does is it says, okay, overall there's about 156,000. So we're right in the ballpark of what the forecast said of use of general fund. There's about another 112,000 of other funds. And then there's some things that staff's recommending be moved to 21, 22. And so this is a place that want to get any council thought if there's any of these items you want to change or do differently, and we can come back to this. I did want to briefly speak. One of the one-time items on this list here is this tenant mediation placeholder. This was RECOURSE Mediation Services. This is a group out of Santa Rosa, and they are the official landlord tenant mediators of Sonoma County and doing all the unlawful detainer cases. They've put together a proposal for $25,000 to fund 84 mediations. Staff would recommend that you fund this not out of general fund. You fund it out either the housing trust fund, either maybe reduce some of what we've been doing for rental assistance with fish, or use it out of some future funding over the next year with the housing trust fund. I did want to say we've been doing some reference checks, and we've gotten, I think, 2 out of 3 done, and very positive reference checks coming back. So again, we think that if the council, this was an area of interest of the council. And so if this is something, you have to give us direction on how you want to, which funding source, but if you do want to move forward, we think we've got a organization that provides good services at a reasonable rate. And then homeless support. There are a couple things, if council remember, in February, we were working on a safe parking program, and there were basically the program was continued through the end of June, and there was financing and funding that was set aside. So there was about $13,000 set aside for the safe parking program for towing and extra trash pickup. And assuming that program continues this next year, this level of funding, I believe, would be necessary. And then with homeless support, with the pandemic, The governor has basically highly encouraged cities to provide assistance in the world of sanitation and cleanliness for the homeless community. And so from providing hand washing stations and portable restrooms, and then working with Kathy King and SOS clothes washing program. So in terms of support, these dollars, the safe parking dollars could come out of regular general fund if council wanted. These could all, the EOC costs could come out of the emergency response. But these are some items that are currently in the budget, and I'm recommending continued support for our homeless community. And so that is kind of a conclusion of an overview. I'm happy to kind of pull up the actual materials you have in front of you. This was to provide you an overview, and we can pull up, if you give me a minute, I can pull up the actual packet and we can go through so that you can then provide us feedback on different pieces. So it's a pleasure of the council on how you'd like to do that, and happy to answer questions of the council as well.
I have a general question.
Yes, Amy?
Go ahead.
So I guess we were talking about the fact that the city doesn't pay into unemployment. So was any thought given to starting to either self-insure ourselves or look into how we can start to participate in unemployment?
Sue, do you want to answer that question?
We actually haven't pursued that yet. It's because we haven't paid into it in the past. I mean, we're still on the, you know, we're on the hook for whatever prior employees are out there. But we could take a look at it. I've been in 2 cities where they did not do this. They did not pay into unemployment. I've never reestablished that, but we can definitely take a look at that. And we can bring that. We could actually just, you know, do some research on that and bring it, see what that process would be back, maybe for the 29th.
Well,
Okay, or if we were to self-insure, what is a typical amount that people set aside for those purposes?
Yeah, we don't have that information right now, but I think it's a good question, Councilmember Harrington. There's really kind of, it's a cost benefit analysis, right? How much should we be setting aside in case versus what would it cost us if we re-enrolled? What does that look like? And is that the cheaper alternative, or are we better off self-funding? So there's a level of analysis here that we'd have to look at. So if that's an area of council, I don't think we could bring that back by the 29th, but we could bring that back for your consideration in early
I guess
August.
just in a general question would be, in other cities where they self-insure, what is the formula they use to, is there a general formula for people that are self-insured?
Any other general questions?
For general
We go
question.
to public comment, we can go back through your decision-making kind of process. Any general questions of council?
None. I'd like to, when we go through it, I'd like to just go through the things that I've noted for myself.
Great.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Absolutely. Okay, great. I guess we'll go ahead and open public comment. Public comment is open. Did we have any written public comment for this, Latonya?
No, Mayor Harvey, we did not.
And I'm seeing nobody raising their hand for public comment. So I'll go ahead and bring it back to the council. Oh wait, Jack Ding. Jack Ding has raised his hand. We'll bring him in. Public comment is reopened.
Go ahead, Jack. You're able to speak.
And do we have somebody timing? All time.
Yeah, overall, I want to point out 2 things. First of all, reserve fund. Right now, we already started on the reserve fund. And this fund, we have working hard and many, many years to accumulate in 8.85. Definitely, right now is a difficult time, but we should expect more difficulties in the future. So now I want to suggest we had rather reduce our expenses to save our reserve fund for the future when the situation is more difficult because right now we all live in the unpredictable time. So we need to think never going to treat today is raining day, and treat tomorrow is rainy day. Number one. Number two is the police, the funding, and I see that David Cook and Abramonte working hard with the county. That is a very difficult job because basically we don't have any choice, any comparisons. We just contract the taker. It's not a contract the maker. It's not fair. So I saw that on the newspaper, you postponed it, you made an extension. That is wonderful. And we cannot take any contract, which is not fair. Because I look at the amount, the total amount you just mentioned is $5.5 million. And out in the city, residents just only 11,000. So basically each capital, and $500 per capita for this one. I look at it, other cities, especially in Southern California, where it's more crimes, more criminals. And a small city just like us, they just contributed to sheriff around 250 to 280. So when you find any difficulties, negotiate with the counties, sometimes we don't have the leverage. We don't have the power.
Remaining.
But we needed to, ask questions. Maybe sometimes ask questions is a resolution for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ding. Do we have anybody else for public comment? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to council and close public comment.
So Mayor Harvey, I've put up kind of this is the agenda packet in the order that you have, council has in front of you. So we can, again, if council has, we can go through there's pieces that are in the message, there's pieces that are in the packets. So it's a pleasure of the council to go through, go through the agenda packet, and then there's definitely choices and feedback, or would you like to do this more globally? But I have this up in case the council member wants to refer.
My opinion is we should have that up in case the council member wants to refer and do this more globally. I did have a question on the TOT taxes. Last year we started receiving an additional 2% in TOT. I just wanted to be sure that I'm sure it was. So that was all included.
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yes.
So our previous years were based, we added an additional 2% and then kind of averaged it out.
Yeah. So
Okay.
that 2% is included. The 1% the council set aside for affordable housing is not it's
Yeah.
included within the overall TOT, but not included within the general fund
Makes
program.
Okay, great. All right, so do we have council member comments? Thank you, Kathy. I assumed that was the case, but just wanted to be sure. Do we have comments from council? Alan, do you want to start us off? Or do you need to get organized?
No, it's now you all are organized. I was organized.
Okay,
I
so
had
you're organized and are you ready to go?
Sure, I'm absolutely ready to go. There
All
are
right.
some things I think I'm pretty interested in. I appreciate if the council would support SOS at the 35,000. Is that what you're asking about? My thoughts?
Yeah, your thoughts, so your comments. You got wide ranging, all the things you wanted to bring up on the budget.
Sure. Well, no, I found what is on the screen is what I have for this evening. So that's what I anticipated we would be doing. So I have to tell you, for many years, the Ecology Center has been an issue for me. And I think if we're interested in cutting costs, I would like to look at the services or non-service the Ecology Center is supposed to do for East MacArthur, the 2 pieces of property, and Overlook Trail. I'd just like us to look into the services that we're getting for that. I don't know that much about Overlook Trail, but I pass East MacArthur 3 to 5 times every day, and it's bad. And I think the way it was planted was for a forest and not a city street. So I'm possibly looking at eliminating that contract. And I've said this before. My other thing would be, we're canceling events, and I hope to gosh, some of them come back. But what kind of savings is that? What does that make available that we're not going to be having those expenditures, and maybe they're already being absorbed? And let's see, the other one, I think Councilmember Harrington brought up the issue of the developers and retrieving the receivables. I think there has been a letters that have been sent. I'd just like to see that letter and also see the schedule for the retrieval of these debts to the city, because I think that might be around 250 to 290. That certainly would help us. So I just want to know what's happening there. And I saw in the packet, Measure M, temporary use of Measure M, $25,000. I'm sorry, I'm totally against it. I think that was put to before us from the voters, and I don't think that was their intention, unless I'm wrong. Let's see. And I know we've been looking at eliminating contract for neighborhood park maintenance, and we would like to add, the city employees would do that. For me, unless the personnel is part-time, no real savings, and it takes employees. So what does this take employees away from doing? And also, I think the RECOURSE, I looked them up as a nonprofit. I found no information, and I'm glad that our city manager has said that there are some recommendations that are local. That's something I'd really like to do, because at this point, I don't feel I could support them. And the other thing I think I'd like to look into, while I think it's worthy, is the issue of fish, because I think we committed to 100,000, and we might be looking at the next 50,000. And I'd actually like to find out what their finances are. We have difficult finances. They have no employees. They have no paid staff, which I think is great, but we can't say that. So those are some of the things I'm just looking at. Thanks.
So Mayor Harvey, maybe we can provide, can I provide some response back and some information maybe?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Madeline would appreciate it. I would appreciate it as well.
Okay. So Colleen is still on the call, and I know Colleen did some renegotiating of some of the contracts. So I'll ask her to speak to Sonoma Ecology Center.
Sure. So Sonoma Ecology Center for Nathanson Creek Oxbow, which is on the north side of MacArthur, and the Demonstration Garden, a park on the south side of MacArthur, both along Nathanson Creek. The total amount for the contract to take care of both of those properties for a full year is $25,400. That includes the Demonstration Garden as a native plant demonstration garden, and volunteer engagement, and the different things that happen in that space. Their other contract is for taking care of maintenance and management, is what we call it, of the Montini Preserve, and support of the Overlook Trail stewards. So the trail stewards do most of the boots on the ground work on the Overlook Trail. Sometimes Sonoma Ecology Center staff are out there with them supporting particularly challenging efforts. They also serve as the nonprofit for any fundraising and that kind of thing done by the trail stewards. And they take care of the Montini Preserve. Like right now they have goats grazing Montini Preserve under contract to SEC through the city's contract with Sonoma Ecology Center. The contract for Montini Preserve and Overlook last year was $55,000 for 2021, and it's proposed to be $35,000. That's based on negotiations between me and Sonoma Ecology Center to bring those costs down, given the budget crisis facing the city right now.
So how is that monitored? I mean, like I said, I see these two horrible fields on East MacArthur all the time. And possibly, maybe I don't appreciate high grasses and weeds. or some of the things that they have there. So how often is this monitored? And are there discussions about the maintenance? That's all that's asked of them to do is maintenance. And I guess they might be having, maybe there are special plants there, but it's pretty unpleasant.
Yeah, that's a challenging thing to address, I think, Councilmember Agramonte. The people have very diverse views about what's pleasant in terms of landscaping, and that park on the south side of MacArthur, and actually the one on the north, has an emphasis on native plants, which some people find very attractive and some people don't. It's definitely not like your standard urban park. It doesn't look like the Plaza or most of our neighborhood parks. It's very much a different look. Both of those properties are under easements through the open space district, and they do have requirements on what can happen on those properties. So it's not an option really for the city to convert either of those properties to more of a typical urban park setting. That's helpful.
Well, they're still awful, and I'm sorry that we contracted with them, and I'm sorry we're stuck in this, because I think it's pretty terrible. I have to pass it all the time. And it looks like weeds. Maybe they're indigenous, maybe they're lovely to somebody, but if they're not. Okay, thanks.
There were
So,
additional questions.
Just a few other comments. So there were a number of events that were, because we can't do mass gatherings, more than 12 people. So there are a variety of kind of small items, from city party to the receptions for Alcalde and treasurer artist, a variety of those types of things that have been removed from the budget for this year. Again, they're not a large dollar amount, but if things change in the future and things are better and the pandemic goes away, I hope we can restore those things quickly and start some of those and redo some of those. But at this point, we can't hold those type of events, so those items have been removed. Cost recovery, be happy to send some information to council on that. And there is work underway. The temporary use of Measure M, Colleen, this is another one for you to speak to.
Yes, the parks, Measure M Parks for All funds came in with some restrictions on them and also some allowances for a budget crisis like the city is facing right now. So based on the budget crisis provisions in Measure M Parks for All, the proposal is to use some of those Measure M funds to support regular park maintenance. The Measure M funds are also available for new park maintenance expenditures by the city, and on that basis, Measure M funds are used to fund maintenance and management of the Montini Preserve, which the city did not have to commit funds to before Measure M was passed, because we had funding from the Ag Preservation and Open Space District for a few years after the city took on ownership and management of that property.
So
Colleen, if you can send those details to us with respect to that's meant for maintenance in emergencies, you can send that to us?
Sure.
Okay, thanks.
Were there additional questions, Madeline, or have you got?
Yeah, there was the recourse. I think I heard Kathy say, the city manager say that there were some recommendations. I did not see that in the file, in anything I received. And the other thing was fish.
Yeah, so in terms of recourse, again, we typically wouldn't put out references kind of publicly, but happy to talk with council members one-on-one. But again, we've received two out of three. I mean, one still is pending. One is from a judge, another is from another entity. So happy to provide those to council one-on-one. But again, hearing good things about that organization. In terms of fish, so far the city has made just about $100,000 contribution out of a total of $150,000 the council authorized for use. So it's basically about $50,000 per year per year, excuse me, per month is what is occurring now. And so based on council prior direction, when we look at the month of July, would probably be the last full month of additional 50,000, unless the council wants to change their direction on that.
Well, just a couple of things on recourse. It would have been nice to have that beforehand. I served on a board where I came from, Peninsula Conflict Resolution Center. They contracted with every city. So it's very different here, but it would have been nice because I didn't find anything on them as a nonprofit, which makes me suspicious. And the issue of fish, you know, I think we just have to be very careful when we give out large sums of money. How does their budget compare to ours? We have responsibilities as well. We have staff and they do not, which I think is wonderful. And so I just, you know, I think we should look into that. If the council feels that we should just move ahead with the third $50,000, that's fine. But I just want us to be aware when we do things, we need to know the real facts.
It may be possible for Fish to provide the number of families that they've given money for.
We have that. We get
We
that.
have. They've given us, so Fishes provides us a monthly report of, and broken into the 3 categories that council asked for. Residents, those that is category 1, those that live, that may live outside but work in the work within the city is a 2nd tier, and the 3rd tier, folks that kind of live in the valley but work generally somehow supporting the valley economy. So I think Fish has done a very good job of trying to put the information out. We get a list without names, but with check numbers, et cetera. And we're happy to audit. We can audit that if we feel that need, but there's a full detail that we get in terms of each of the expenditures. It really is a policy question of the council. The authority you all gave to us, gave to staff, was to use basically almost all of the current housing trust fund, which was about $150,000, and to do it in kind of buckets of 50,000. So for next month, I sent an email out to communicate that to council and was going to communicate that publicly as well at next Monday's meeting. So if the council wants to do something different, you can give us direction.
Yeah, well, it's just me. I can't speak for the others. But my question, I think they do wonderful work. But my concern is we are needy as well because we have things that we have to cut. And I just want us to know what their budget is and what effort that they are doing as well. That's all I'm asking. They don't have staff expenditures as we do. Those are the things I want to know. I still think they're a good organization, but you know, my responsibility is to the people of Sonoma, and I want.
They're not using our money for.
Yeah, our money is not going to staff at all, Councilmember.
They don't have staff. Is anybody listening to me?
Well,
they don't pay staff.
I think
they don't have staff. Sorry.
I think a responsive comment about that, which I understand, is just that the funds that we're using are in the housing trust fund. And I don't know whether it's permissible or not to move funds in and out, but we used funds that we had set aside for housing. And I think it would require a legal opinion as to whether we could take those funds out and then use them for our staff, for example, so our staff doesn't have to be cut. I don't know if that's possible or not, but I think what you're saying is we have our own budget problems. So how can we be giving away a large sum of money? And I think the answer is because that money is for housing and not for general fund because of how we allocated it. And it would be a question that Jeff Walter would have to tell us. Could we take money from the housing trust fund and put it back into the general fund? I don't know the answer, but I think that's maybe more responsive to what you were saying.
Right, thanks. So, and I'm saying this is a worthy program, but we need to know the need, and we need to know that we have a need. And thank you, Amy, I think you helped me with that.
Yeah, and just for council, again, the Housing Trust Fund was set via resolution, and the program that you set there was set via resolution. You could do another resolution and modify and change a policy and pull that funding out. Again, it's not in an ordinance. So there, if you wanted to change those, you could have different policy directions.
No,
You can
that's
make
not
those
like
changes.
that's not my wish. My hope is that in the future, we are far more careful when we do this. That's all.
Thank you.
I have some comments.
All right, go right ahead, Vice Mayor.
Thank you. So I wanted to start with a few comments about our reserves, which I am proud that Sonoma has such a healthy reserve. And back in 2017, we feared that we were going to have to dig into it, but we ended up being able to ride that one and recover without having to do what we're doing this time. And I take it seriously that we're using a large sum of our reserve fund to offset our reduced budget this year, but I also think this is why we have it, especially the emergency reserve. Perhaps with the way things are going, next year is going to have something even more unprecedented, and then we'll find ourselves in this situation again. But I think we find ourselves in a bad situation, and this is why we've been saving this money to give us a little runway. And so for this year, I'm happy to support what's being recommended. Next year, I would support using half of whatever we end up using this year. And in the third year, I wouldn't want to use any at all, because if things are still slow 3 years from now, we're just going to have to figure out how to live in that world and use the money that we have and go for that. So I hear Jack Dean's point, and it's this very serious thing, and I don't see this as a permanent solution. I think that part of the problem with trying to budget is, not knowing anything about the future. This is just completely unprecedented, and maybe it'll be worse than we think, or maybe it won't be worse, but we'll have more information even 3 months from now and 6 months from now, and then we can sort of decide how deeper we need to go and sort of cutting things that are going to be very noticeable to people if we get to that point. So that's how I feel about the reserves. I'm also happy at this point with this budget that we are not in a position where we are hearing recommendations for laying off staff, other than the 3 positions that were mentioned in relation to the police contract that we just renewed. We have small staff, and we already struggle to keep up with everything that we want to do. And because we don't know what the future holds, I don't want to go too heavy-handed and make changes that are going to end up being something that was not warranted. But I also recognize that we don't know what the future is, and 3 months from now and 6 months from now, we're going to have to reassess our situation and decide where we go from there. One quick note about the cemetery. This is something that has come up every year. I think last year was the year that we were supposed to spend some serious attention on it and figure out a way to make that program more sustainable, and it keeps getting punted all the time. And so I think that we just need to commit ourselves to diving in, getting help if we need it, and just figuring that one out, because it's been on the list since the entire time I've been on the council. There's always things that come ahead of it. And so hopefully this year we can find some time so that it won't be the thing that we're always going to do next year. For the Eviction Mediation Services, I think that this could be something that's really helpful if the public actually knows it is an available resource. I would hope that it would be something that we would only pay for services rendered. And I don't think that we should use the Housing Trust Fund for it. The Housing Trust Fund was initially created for long-term housing strategies, and we have already completely rated it for things that are not long-term housing strategies. And that's the problem with amending what the program is because there will always be something that's better today to use it for, rather than saving up for a future day for something that's going to cost us a lot of money. And even now, the money that we had in it, we were close to a point where we could have leveraged that with a state grant program and walked away with $1 million. And that's something that we can't get because we don't even have a housing trust fund anymore. So I think that at this point, the city has no long-term housing strategy. I hope that that changes. I hope that we figure out a way to replace the money that we took from the housing trust fund, but I certainly don't want to use it for this program. And I think that since this is a need that has arisen out of the emergency itself, it is something that I would be comfortable using our reserves to fund. For the homelessness funding, those are things that that we must do, and I think that we are responsible for doing. And I know that with our police contract negotiations, there were some savings made there, and I think that the money that was saved should be reallocated for homelessness. And finally, just a note on the police contract, which I find it timing of that approval unfortunate, kind of in everything that's happening in the world. But as we get into discussions locally about the sheriff's office and our local police force and policies and that sort of thing, one of the things that I would like to discuss are different types of employees that we might consider for our police force, maybe some that are not armed or social workers, and have a reconfiguration of the positions that make up our police force and to see how those costs compare, because we know that a deputy costs the city about $300,000 a year. And then the last part of that is one of the positions that we had talked about that was not on the list to get cut now, but maybe reconsidered at some point, is the school resource officer. And I've been learning more about these programs, and that is something that I think that we should have a discussion about sometime soon after the break to talk about that program and see if it's something that the city is still interested in spending its money on. And those are my comments.
Councilmember Harrington or
Yeah, I can go ahead, Mayor Harvey.
all right.
If that's okay. I want to commend staff. This has been a good budget in trying times, and I really understand. It's a tool that we're going to use, and probably where I look at it is this is a budget that we will use as a tool, and we're going to have to take a look at it every quarter, because I understand that nobody knows. I mean, I don't know what's going to happen with the reopening July 1st, or if we're going to have a relapse. And I have no problem taking reserves. I don't want to cut any city staff. The 3% is warranted because this is trying times. But as we look at it, we're just going to have to figure out, when the bleeding stops, what do we have to cut if it continues? And that's probably going to be the hardest part. I'll be off the council probably by then, because I think it'll be mid-year budget that will be the trying times, or maybe it won't. Maybe things will bounce back and we won't have to worry about it as much. But I think we're in a good direction. And I really love what city staff has done, these projections, out to 5 years. Unfortunately, nobody knows. So they're just projections, and but it's something that I think makes us know that we're going to look back at it. So I would definitely advise that, September 1, when we're looking at the resource officer and different things like that, that we really take a hard look at, where things are going. And I'm hoping that data is available. And that's the hardest part is, a lot of people don't realize, but, we're not getting that data isn't as timely as one would like, but that's just how the operation works. But end by saying that the city manager and I and all the council members have reviewed this budget over and over, and I commend Kathy Capriola for her hard work and dedication. I don't think the public understands sometimes 7 o'clock in the morning when Kathy. It's the only time I can meet, and she's right there on a Zoom meeting, and we're going through all this. So I think this is a good tool. I think there'll be a lot of things that will probably change, and I do agree a lot with Madeline Agramonte about some of her concerns, and even Vice Mayor Hunley's concerns about certain things. But just have an open mind, and I will be supporting the recommendations of this budget, but knowing that times are going to change. either for the better or for the worse, and we'll just have to use this tool. So that's my feedback on the whole thing.
I could go.
Go ahead.
So I guess I would first, having sat through, this is my 4th budget meeting, I want to say thank you to the staff for providing us with all the detail in advance, and then having a shorter presentation. I thought that was a really good format for me personally. At some point I do want to have information about what we should be funding for the unemployment and having that worked into our budget. But I would agree with what Councilmember Cook said, that basically this is a somewhat of a placeholder so that we know we can meet our obligations while we figure out what the economic future is going to look like. So I think that's fine. There are certain programs that I don't want to see cut. I also agree that using funds that were promised to the voters for improving parks for just regular ongoing costs, I think that in general, just like I said about the library, it really decreases voters' desire to vote for taxes when they don't go to what they were originally promised. So I see that as a problem. But overall, I can support this budget. And aside from the issue about the unemployment, I don't have any changes. I would say I don't know that there's been on the mediation. I've never been approached by anyone in the community saying that a mediation service would be helpful. So I don't have any external data with regard to the desire for that service in town. And maybe it is desirable, but I don't have any data points to support that it has been requested by anyone in the community as a service. So I don't know that I support that.
Okay. Great. I also want to commend staff for their work to put together this budget. This is an extremely difficult scenario in which to put together a budget, and forecasting the future of this current world is rather difficult, as we've all seen. There's a lot of concerns over second spikes and over secondary shutdowns and the rest of it, which may lead us into a second difficult time. But right now, things look significantly better than they looked 2 months ago. We have hotels that are opening up, and we have businesses that are opening up, and so things are starting to look better. But we also have increased case counts throughout the country. So, the important thing here is for both business and for public health, for the economy, as well as our health, is to wear masks, to respect the public health orders, to get tested, to avoid being in large groups, and to support our local businesses. I think, our local businesses are really the backbone of this economy that we have here and of what we're able to do, and the city's budget and everything else. The sales tax and TOT are kind of our main drivers of income. And so I think that's really important that we keep public health in mind. And I know people have been concerned about mask wearing, and I was talking to the chamber, the head of our chamber, Mark, today, and he was telling me that the mask signs are going up tomorrow. So we're going to get more and more, and I know Public Works puts them up on Friday. So we're getting more of that information up so that the people that do come visit can be aware of how to do things safely. So that's how well we do, it's how well the country does, because we are a destination town. As far as, I think Fish has done an excellent job. The need is there. I talk to Sandy every other week, really, on my food security meeting call, and we are providing homes for hundreds of families. When we developed the Housing Trust Fund, we did not specifically say it was for long-term housing. We discussed items like rental assistance and down payment assistance at that time. So it is an appropriate use of the fund. And I'm glad that we are using it in that way. With regard to mediation services, I would like to know more about recourse and what the actual need is. I agree with Vice Mayor Hundley's comments that I would prefer to know that it's a fee for service issue. And if we're guaranteed to spend $25,000, I may not be ready to support it. I would have some concerns there. So that's that. I appreciate again the work of Councilmember Cook and Councilmember Harrington on the police contract. That was a difficult budget negotiation that you both went through. And I'm proud that we were able to get a reduction in the police services there. And I've seen some statistics, I'm not sure how accurate they are, that we're among the lowest as a percentage of total budget for police services solely. But that may or may not be true. I haven't verified those numbers myself, but I've seen some of that around, so I think that's good. I have been involved in conversations with other mayors, and we have a mayor's meeting every Friday, and there's some conversations in the county going on about different roles, kind of looking at public safety in a different way and bringing out officers who may not be armed, bringing out mental health services or some other type of counselor, and reserving police forces that are armed for more violent or more dangerous situations. And so these are discussions that are ongoing, but unfortunately, you know, as Jack Bing said, we don't have the purview to decide them. But I think we can influence, certainly. We're able to have a discussion over the SRO, which I think is an interesting conversation for sure. And the public seems to may have a slightly different view of that now in light of recent events. So interested in having that conversation, though there is some value there as well. So going forward, again, really appreciate the work that staff has done. Very, very glad that we're able to move forward without cutting employees. I think that we, at this time, I think that we run on a very lean team here, and we've put together a very good team, and it's taken a number of years to get us to a place where we feel staffed and that we can provide a high quality of service to our residents. And so I'm glad to see that we can continue it, but we are watching this tightly and very closely and making sure that we can we react to the reality of the situation on the ground, and provide a high quality of service, but also a fiscally responsible city going forward. I am concerned about using reserves, as we all are, but this is what they are for disaster situations like this. We're hopeful that we can get through the fire season without additional disasters. You know, I knock on wood right now, even mentioning it, but I think it's something we all have to be cognizant of. If you live in the unincorporated area, or if you've got significant brush in your backyard living here, you know, remove that, please. Cut your brush down, contact the fire department. Defensible space, please help us with that. Get a goat maybe, if that works, to make sure that we've got good safety and security there, and we'll see what happens through PSPS time as well. So we're used to disaster now here in Sonoma, and we're getting better at putting budgets for it. And I support this current budget. And thank you so much to staff for your hard work. I know a lot of hours have gone towards putting this together. And I agree with Councilmember Cook. I don't think the public realizes how much work our staff puts in to put things like this together for you. Sue, thank you so much for digging out of previous budgets and getting us into a good space and putting this together and dealing with a forecast and then a council member adjustment of that forecast, because we wanted to be a little more frugal. And Kathy, thank you for all of your hard work with this as well. Your finance brain has been so useful here. And, you know, I'm proud of a city that has the kind of reserves that we do. And it's kept us in a space where we can handle a disaster of this magnitude and still be relatively fiscally sound. Though we need resurgence of our funds before we can move forward. So thank you so much. I appreciate it. Do we have a motion for this? Do we have additional comments?
Actually, Mayor Harvey, can we just a few areas that I think I heard some different opinions from council members. And as we bring the final budget back to you, just want you all to have a conversation, I think, about just a couple things. One is the RECOURSE Mediation Services. I heard different perspectives. My understanding from a conversation with Jeff Walter is, again, and I can't find my notes on this right now, but the kind of eviction ordinance, I think, goes through the end of July. And so if someone's going to renegotiate, potentially they might have payments coming up in August. Is that what folks remembered? So there is a little bit of a time sensitivity on this.
I thought our eviction ordinance was 60 days after the governor declares the emergency.
Right. So the governor, thank you. I was new. So the governor is the end of July. So this sits here as there's 60 days after. So one option on this would be don't put in the budget and we could put together a little more information for you. You could have the executive director come to the first meeting in August, present to you. So you meet that individual. That's another way to go about it if there's an interest of council. You could decide to move forward now. Again, we do have 2 positive references and I can share those details with council offline. So I do need to know, because I heard some mixed thoughts about the recourse in terms of whether there was support for that or not.
My feeling about this and then questions over how to pay for it. I think that we should have an additional discussion and bring this forward and bring the executive director forward. I would be surprised if Newsom didn't extend that emergency, but he may not. We'll see. So I think since we have the time, if it's possible to bring them forward, meet them, make council feel more comfortable. And I think it's also additionally, if we do go forward with the program, it's an additional advertisement of the program so that we make sure it's utilized. And I do want the fee for service versus we're in for 25 grand answered before I vote on that.
It could definitely be done as a fee for service with a not to exceed. So yes, it could be done in that manner as well.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree.
Okay.
And I also agree with the mayor. I would like to take.
All right.
Okay. So at this point, what we'll do is we will make sure that the 25,000 is not in the budget for now. Okay. And then, because I don't think we had programmed this because this was the question of which funding source to use. And then we'll look at early August to have the executive come and speak to all of you and make some, and we can learn more about their program. And you can decide then if you want to proceed or not.
Mr. Mayor, would you allow me? Two last things. One, of course, is the issue with the retrieval, I guess, of the accounts receivable for developers. I would like to see the letter that goes out to say, do we twist an arm? Do we want this? And who's following up? Because I think we've been told a couple of times it's happening, but I'd like to see proof. I would appreciate that. The second thing, I'd like to say thank you. Thank you to everybody here and out there. The Women's Club has closed their fundraising for SOS and we've raised $5,000. So, and that will be given directly to SOS. So we appreciate everyone who has bought a sign for us. Thank you very much. And don't forget to fill out your census form.
Thank you.
Melvin?
One other item that I think would be good, I heard some conversations about Parks Measure M. Again, this is a policy call. We're looking for every dollar to backfill general fund. And the measure does allow us to take those you don't get much deeper emergency than where we are right now. But if council's not comfortable, you can decide, and it would be good for you all to tell us now, if you want us that Parks Measure M to not use that, we would backfill that with reserves, and the Parks Measure M money we would just put in we would just hold it in the Parks Measure M, and then we can look to see the plan was that to go back into kind of neighborhood parks, I think, or some other parks measures. So we could program it back in the CIP and then keep and use reserves to backfill the operational side.
Thank you. I'm more comfortable with that.
Amy, couldn't hear you there. Sorry, your mic went off and on, but can't hear you.
Can't hear you.
Sorry. So you're good. You're in agreement. Thank you. We'll do the thumbs up. Sounds like you're Councilmember Harrington's is in agreement with Councilmember Agramonte and my recommendation. Any other thoughts on that?
I'm fine with that if it makes everybody feel better.
That's fine.
Thank you.
Okay, so
would
again,
be-
I think one thing that is always important is we don't want voters to lose confidence when they are voting for tax measures, and I agree with Councilmember Harrington on that piece, since we did go back and forth on it ourselves, so happy to make that change and make that change in the budget for what you'll see next week. And then the only other one is the school resource officer. So the school resource officer, this is again a position we split with 3 positions. $83,000 is currently in the budget. The interesting thing is it is time for, we do a 3-year contract every year with the school district, the sheriff, and the city. There's a 30-day exit clause in that 3-year agreement, but that agreement, of course, is up June 30 of this year. So one of the items that we were going to have on the agenda is one of the contracts for next week was for you to recommending you continue that school resource officer. That position, so I would still recommend you continue it. If you want to have a policy conversation in August, you could still do that. And if you decide to decline and move on and not fund the position, again, the council could pull out of that. I do think it's an important conversation to talk about how that position supports a variety of safety in the schools, but and how that kind of position also backfills some of our general patrol. And it'd be good to have Chief Rodriguez on the phone when on the call when we're talking through this. So we've got a little bit of kind of a timing glitch with that contract. So I think the question is the council comfortable with kind of approving a contract, continuing the money in the budget for this year, and knowing that you can revisit that in August, September with additional information? And should you choose to go another way, it's a 30-day pool.
So, Mr. Mayor, could I ask, is this 83,000, is it split 3 ways or it's times 3?
It's times 3. Our share is about 83,000.
Okay, thank you. And I just wanted to mention to Colleen, because the decision on Measure M was changed, you don't have to send me any details, but I'm still interested in finding out about the information from regarding the accounts receivable for the developers, the process.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Maybe my audio works now.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I had to come inside the house. So just on the school resource officer, I supported cutting that pretty broadly during our negotiations, but agreed that we could put it off into a second round of cuts. On a personal note, I went to a pretty large public high school, and I remember showing up there and there being police there, which was the first time I had ever seen that, and thinking, why are there armed police in my high school, and how weird that is. And so there had been a lot of support, from the police, and also some other people that we talked to saying they thought it was really valuable. So we decided that we would allow some time to think about it. I think there probably are much better people that we could have in a high school other than an armed police officer. I don't support that, just like I don't support having attack dogs. I don't support that either. And I think that it's really lucky that we're having this conversation now, but I think those are, I would be happy not to eliminate the funds, but to change the positions completely. And for 83,000 times 3, I'm sure we could have a very different mix of people interacting with our high school population.
Thank you.
I would,
Sorry.
I appreciate Councilmember Harrington's comments and feedback. Since the date's coming up, I would prefer to just not enter into the agreement, and then we decide if it's something that we actually want to do.
Dum-dum.
Well, I guess it's my turn. I would like to stay on course where we take a look at it the way we were going to, but keep the money in the budget. Because I think it's going to be a good discussion, and I did like to hear, I would like to have our chief of police, really explain what the school officer and we can make a decision as a council. And the next month is really going to be there's going to be a lot of changes and different things happening that we'll be able to make a better decision at that point. But I would like to have it in there because earlier, like I was saying, the budget is a tool, and part of the tool is it's like a tool chest. You keep things in there until you take them out, and then you use them or you throw them out. So that's how I feel on that.
Amy, I appreciate your discussion, your sharing, because I, like you, have had those same experiences. Here at the high school, they keep losing principals, and those leaders are constantly leaving. The officer that works there helped an awful lot with smoking, vaping, and other issues that affect young people, but I don't really know the connection of whether it's punitive or it's social work. And that would be great if the chief, I feel that might weigh on social work, but I think the chief would be able to explain that to us.
Yeah, I think that we need to have a broader discussion and hear from the community writ large about this position. I mean, since I've been on council, I remember at least 3 different times where we heard about threats to schools. And it was a direct conversation with the school resource officer that those threats were mitigated, that people got in touch with the students who were making the threats. They talked about what had been posted, and it was that relationship that from talking to Bob Smith that the goal of the program is to move people away from things like juvenile hall or getting into issues with the law and move them into better direction programs and the rest of it. So I agree that it may not be necessary for that to be a police officer or directly associated with the police. And it may not be necessary for it to be, so there may be other programs out there. But I think that we should hear from the kids who are in that program, the chief of police, and the parents that are at the schools before we make a sudden decision. I think that there's a lot to learn about this. I myself don't have children in the school, and I also don't experience a fear of the police personally because of basically my background and the color of my skin. So I think that those issues have definitely come up and become a larger conversation at the moment, but we should have the conversation and listen to the broader public about what they want to see done in their community. So I think there's good arguments for and against. I look forward to hearing them, and I appreciate the work of council on that. So I think we should proceed as we currently are.
Proceed as we currently are, meaning.
Let's have the conversation on the 29th and see what public says about this. Let's hear about the program, more about the program, and understand what the actual goal is. I mean, there's a real problem with school to prison pipelines for sure throughout the nation. And we should be cognizant of that. But we should make sure find out what our actual program is and see what's actually happening in our community, and then make a decision with those facts in front of us.
I don't think next Monday we'll be able to have a thorough conversation on this. I mean, it might be we get enough information to make a yes or no decision on the contract. I would say no, but I think that it would require a more intentional meeting at a later point also.
Great. Well, we'll find out on the 29th.
Amy, we can't hear you. Your mic's not working then.
So I'm confused because I thought we approved the police contract, but we had negotiated that there were tier 2 cuts, which included the school resource officer that we were going to hear. Originally I thought we said July, but maybe it's August. And so my understanding, which I guess is wrong, is that we were voting to authorize the funds that we already approved as part of the police contract, which we previously approved. Is that wrong?
Correct. The budget only includes, the budget does not, at this point, the school resource officer is still funded within the police budget. It was not part of a kind of the next tier reductions. And because as we looked at overall whether what we needed, kind of what we were trying to do with the scenarios, we were trying not to do any further reductions or layoffs or anything else, knowing there's a kind of a broader conversation that's also been occurring in the community now. I think the question is, I think what we need to do is agendize this separately, because it's kind of grown into a conversation that really we should have a separate agenda item. So let me see, even because what we can do to have a brief conversation next meeting that you all, and then if we need to have it kind of come back and get kicked to an August conversation.
But just for the budget, we already approved the police contract. So what right do we have to not fund it?
Yeah, you would have to be doing with it. I'm sorry, let me answer that question. There was a process that we put in place that the city can do additional mid-year reductions. And I'd have to dig that section of the contract out. We did put that ability in, so it wasn't kind of beginning of the year, you make your decisions. As we're in a fiscal year, if the city needed to make additional reductions, those requirements, but it does take, the contract basically says that the sheriff has an ability to have up to 3 months to shift that position to another position in the county, because they need time to move that position. So that's,
in terms of what we can vote on, we actually are not allowed to not vote for this contract because we already agreed to it.
you agreed to it before, and if you wanted to do an adjustment, there would be a shift in how that could occur.
So what is it that you were saying about the contract that has to be approved by the end of July?
The contract was this broader 3-year contract that said, you want to have a school resource officer and we're going to jointly fund it. And again, the way this has worked for years, it's been a 3-year contract. I did reach out to the sheriff to say, could this be a 1-year contract based on some of the conversations that are happening community-wide? And again, the feedback is it's a 3-year with a 30-day exit if you want to exit. I'm really going to need to go pull the contract to look at kind of the mid-year piece and have a conversation with the sheriff. But I think there's a variety of, so one of the things we're going to bring to you next week, for example, when we bring you have told us, for example, like on one of the items within the budget was all the rec providers and doing kind of a 15% reduction on the rec providers and holding, for example, the Chamber of Commerce fully funding those. A lot of those contracts are also up June 30. So one of the items we're going to bring to you as part of the budget is a resolution that will say all of these contracts, basically we're approving them as part of the budget. We're saying yes, fund them, and we're authorizing the city manager to go execute these contracts. And that'll be laid on the table for you. So originally the school resource officer was just going to be kind of on that list, but it sounds like there's a broader policy conversation. So I've got to figure out now kind of how to bring that back in a different way. Sorry for the confusion on that. So I think let staff have some time to talk about that one offline. But those were the main things I wanted to talk about. The recourse, the Measure M, and the school resource officer were areas I heard some different perspectives from council members. So otherwise, based on anything else, we would leave the rest of the items, we would leave within the budget and bring forward.
Great. Yeah, so let's find out how we can have that conversation. It sounds like it's a pleasure of council to discuss it. So let's bring it forward, and if we can, hold it so that we can have a broader and more expansive discussion about it, if that makes sense, and then bring it back mid-year. I mean, even if we can't bring this back on the 29th, we should still discuss the issue as a policy direction, and then we can bring it back mid-year and cut that piece, which would be in accordance with the contract that all 5 of us voted for.
Yeah, and I would just say that in light of, city staff, this could be, something that really requires a lot of research. And so you deserve the time to put together the agenda item and not have it is important, but not have it piled on top of piled, up to your eyeballs. And so we should figure out when is a reasonable time for that discussion to take place, given our staff constraints and also all the hard work that just went into getting this budget done.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think, you know, this is important, and I understand that there's a variety of concerns and questions in the community right now. As we look at transitioning or shifting any services, things take some time to do. I do think that historically, this has been a very important position for us, both in terms of backup staffing that happens with patrol, and some of the relationships that have been built. Again, could there be something in the future that could be done differently? But some of these conversations are going to take us a glide path to get to also. But let's come back and let me chew it through with Chief Rodriguez and the sheriff, and frankly the superintendent, and figure out how to kind of have this conversation.
Oh, and Kathy, one more piece of information. Maybe it's already known, but like, is the high school going to be in person in the fall? Do they know how many kids are going to be there? I mean, it might just be a totally different scenario. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're still making some of those final decisions. What I'm hearing more is it's going to still be a hybrid, some online, some in person.
Yeah, so even the role might be different. So.
Okay.
Yep.
Anyway, Mayor Harvey, thank you and council, thank you for your feedback. And again, I do want to thank department heads for all the work that everyone put in, and Sue and Jenna and Lori Decker. It's a huge 3D puzzle when you're putting a budget together, especially with the level of uncertainty we have. But I think we'll step it forward and then keep evaluating every 60, 90 days and see what happens next.
All right. Great. Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you.
Anything else? We're good? All right, cool. All right.
Was that meeting adjourned?
Vice Mayor, would you like to formally adjourn the meeting?
This meeting is adjourned. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
Rick.
Thank
See
you,
ya.
Vice Mayor Hundley.